Welcome to Ask Maureen, where we cover historical image analysis, genealogy, and how to work with your family photo collection. I'm Maureen Taylor, the photo detective, and I'll try to answer your questions. Welcome to the Photo Detective. You can watch the video on Facebook or listen to the podcast on iTunes. Today's guest is Bob Schmitt of Visual Face Recognition, and I'm known as the Photo Detective for my work connecting your family photographs with your family history. Now, Bob and I met a number of years ago now. I'm embarrassed to think about how long that was, but Visual Face Recognition is software that lets you compare two faces, and it's pretty cool. So welcome, Bob.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So before we show what VFR, as we abbreviate it to, can you tell me your background and how you got started in this whole facial recognition thing?
Sure. I started in face recognition back in 1998, if you can believe it. And we were doing face recognition and trying to find a place where we could actually have the technology implemented. And casinos turned out to be the perfect place. If you're going to do face recognition, you need three things. You need cameras, and if you've ever been in a casino, there are thousands of cameras around. You need to have a database, and believe it or not, there was a database of bad guys in casinos. And also, you need to have a need. And at the time, MIT had formed these card counting teams, and they were killing the casinos. So they wanted to figure out who they were and try to stop them before they took too much money. And the irony was, of course, that we were using MIT software to find them. So it was sort of an MIT versus MIT game in the casinos. But it worked very well. We found that the technology worked on at that time, a fairly small database. But what was interesting was that when you got a comparison, you got two faces. Sometimes it was very difficult to tell whether or not that was actually the same person. And out of that came the face comparison software that allowed us to look at two pictures and try to figure out if it was the same person or not. And so that's how I, roundabout way that I got started with this technology.
Well, that's pretty cool because I've seen that movie.
Yeah.
About the card counters. I think it's called 21.
Right.
Yeah, it's a good movie. So, Bob, you're behind catching the bad guys.
Yeah.
Your software, anyway.
Right, yeah.
So how does the software work? I've used it, obviously, and we're going to watch a little video in a little bit, and it's my voice track on it. So that was kind of interesting. But it's two faces. Tell us how it works. And I actually used it on the show Pawn Stars. So a lot of people have been asking me, what software did I use, blah, 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 blah. But it's your software. It's Visual Face Recognition. So how does it work?
Well, it's what you do with Visual Face Recognition is you take two images, and of course, the better the images, the better the comparison is going to be. And also, the better the closer the angle from the two images, the better the results will be. So if you have two images straight on and you're doing a comparison, you'll get very, very good results from that. Now, the first thing we do is we locate the eyes on each photograph. And the reason we do this is that's the way we normalize the faces. If the distance is the same between the eyes on two images, then everything else will be the same if it is the same person. So you'll see the nose will be the same, the mouth will be the same, and so forth. So that's very important, getting the marking of the eyes correct.
Right. You're talking not necessarily just you match the eyes, you've matched the faces. You're talking about laying out the points in the face. Is it 20 points or is it 20 points that you map?
Well, we map the when we do the face, we do we do two eyes, and then we move we sort of move the face so that it's as much as we can on an equal plane between the two images. And then once we do that, we're then able to move a line across the two images, and you can quickly see where there are similarities, where the images are the same, or you can see where the images are not the same. And it's amazing how obvious it is. It's not one of those things where you look at it and you say, oh, I'm still not sure. 99% of the time, that's going to tell you pretty much whether or not you have the same person. Then we also do a morphing, really a fade in and fade out from one image to the other. And this also gives you a good chance to look at the two images and see where there are similarities and where there are differences. And once you've been through that process, then you're able to make the determination whether or not it's the same image. But I think it's also important to point out that, from the time we're born, we recognize faces. I mean, we're babies, we recognize our mother, our father, the members of the family, and it's something we're taught, from the time we're born. And so even today, doing that face comparison visually is much better than trying to let a computer decide whether or not this is the same image or not. So even though the computer gets to the point where you have two images, it's still necessary to have a human look at it and verify that those are, in fact, the same person.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot more that goes into facial recognition. It's not just the points in the face. This is the photo detective talking. It's, are the two photographs of the same person, because you have all of the data behind it to link that picture to the other person, like same place, same family, same everything. Two random photographs, maybe not so much, because we all have people that we sort of look alike, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you do. Yeah. But even then, even when you take people that look alike, and there's a lot of these internet sites that will show, this actor looks like this actor. When you actually put the two of them on the face comparison, they really don't look anything alike.
Right.
So it's kind of fun to see the differences and how they work.
Yeah. So why don't we run the video?
Okay, there we go.
Did you ever wish you could compare the faces in your family photos? Well, now you can, thanks to visualfacerecognition.com and their product called FaceOff. It's so simple. All you need to do is download the software and start selecting files. Before you begin, let's talk about 2 image rules to follow. First, for best results, select images where the person is facing in the same direction, and use high-resolution pictures whenever possible. If you're scanning pictures, be sure to do so at 600 dpi. Okay, you're ready to begin. Select your first file and click Next. The software magnifies the face as you scroll over the picture. Place a cross in the center of each eye and click Next. Do the same for the second photo and click Next again. FaceOff will automatically resize the images for a side-by-side comparison. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a slider. Move that, and you'll see a vertical line that will move across the 2 images so that you can easily compare features in the 2 photos. At the bottom of the screen, you can select Overlay. As you move the slider bar on the right side, you'll be able to fade the pictures in and out, allowing for extra comparisons. You'll be looking for similarities in the distance from the eyes to the nose, the mouth, and the chin, as well as the shape of the face. The location of the eyes will stay the same. It's important to remember that there are no perfect matches, that families often share facial characteristics, and that even perfect strangers can be looked for. FaceOff makes it easier to do image comparisons, though. For more information, see the user manual that comes with your software.
All right. Thank you, Bob.
Okay.
Now you just have to stop sharing. There you go. All right. So I made that like years ago now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah. Still works.
It still works. So the software is available for Windows and the Mac. and
Right.
you sell it for $29.95 on visualfacerecognition.com, and that gives them a license for 1 year.
No, that's a perpetual license.
Perpetual license.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Great. So that's a good thing to know. So you buy it once, $29.95, and you can run through all your family photos. But in that video, I talk about things to be aware of, like family members often look alike, right? That can skew.
Yep.
And that skews things when you're doing facial recognition on like Facebook, for instance. You know, a friend of mine said that Facebook popped up and showed him in New Orleans. And he said, that's great, except I wasn't in New Orleans. My brother was in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And so that's a kind of cool example. But there are times when it doesn't work. So what other things influence whether or not you can actually make a good comparison?
Well, as I said, the main thing is the head angle. If we were doing mugshots of criminals, we would have a straight-on photograph that was taken when they were booked. Those would be really easy to compare. It's interesting when you're doing old pictures. It seems like the studios either had you facing straight forward or looking slightly to the right or the left. And so when you do old photos, often the angles are pretty good. But if you have one where someone is looking, 30 degrees to the right and the other image is straight on, that's not gonna give you a very good result. You can run it, but you won't be able to compare features. You'll only be able to compare sort of where the features are in relation to the top and the bottom of the face, but you won't be able to do much else. Also, when you scan images, if you don't scan them with enough definition, then sometimes it's very hard to capture the eyes and to find out where exactly the marking should be. And if that happens, then the image will pixelate. You'll see little squares where you should see an image, and the comparison won't be very good. So I always tell people, if you're going to scan at the highest DPI you can to get a good image for the comparison.
Mm-hmm.
But a caution, don't make them too large, because the software can't handle it if you throw 3 megabytes at it. Then it'll tell you to cut it down.
Right. It works best with JPEGs.
Oh, yeah, it works with JPEGs.
Yeah, it works with JPEGs. Right.
Yep. But it's pretty easy to use. I mean, really, it isn't hard. You load the software. We give you a key. You put the key in once. You're done. And after that, you just have to open it up and then download the images.
Right. Right. I know. I like it. People ask me all the time, well, why can't I have the same software that law enforcement has? And this is pretty good. This is pretty good. But you have to be able to read faces. Not everyone can read the face.
Right.
But this is just another tool in your photo identification toolbox to see if you have the right person. Now, comparing a baby picture to a person who's much older, that's a tricky one, because babies' faces change so much.
Yeah, I don't think a baby would be very accurate, but it's interesting. We're doing a project now where about a 14-year-old girl is being compared to I'd say 50-something woman, and it's absolutely incredible how close the images are. I mean, it really is staggering that the faces don't change that much once they've sort of gotten to a full growth area, and then it's fine. So you can do those comparisons.
So what do you think about all the facial recognition stuff that's available now? I mean, obviously you were one of the pioneers with the MIT versus MIT in the casinos, but I used to live in the Boston area with the whole Whitey Bulger thing, and they drag some poor soul who was on vacation into the police station and think he was Whitey Bulger. I mean, how good is all of that facial recognition stuff right now, do you think?
Well, I think I think it's probably pretty good, but um, as you said, you've got to do that last step. You've got to do that last comparison to make sure, yeah, this really is Whitey Bulger. It's not some poor guy walking down the street. Um, the reason face recognition is so hard is that your face can create so many angles. I mean, if I look a little right, if I look up, if I look down, it's going to be hard for that computer to be able to make a match on somebody. And if you wear a baseball hat down over your face, that's hard. It's hard to get the eyes and hard to get the whole head. But by the way, the funny thing about the casinos was that when people realized what we're doing, that's exactly what they started doing, was wearing baseball hats. Well, it's not hard to spot somebody in a casino wearing a baseball hat and wondering why they're doing it. So they sort of gave themselves away doing that. But there are a lot of ways to fool it. I'd say it's a good first approximation, but after that, you've got to be really careful with what you're doing.
Well, I know that a lot of people come to me and want to know not just about their ancestors, but they've bought a photograph at an antique shop and they think it's a famous person.
Right.
Right? They just think it is. And they'll find experts to run some sort of software. I have a list of places that people have sent pictures to, and they come back to me and they say, I have a 95.8% match rate. And I look at it and say, okay, here's your photograph that you bought in the antique shop. Here's the famous person. This picture was taken, or the most recent one, the photograph was taken after 1900, and it was supposedly a couple of people who died in the late 19th century. I'm like,
yeah,
this isn't the same person.
Can't be, yeah.
The person doing the software comparison was just looking at the faces and saying, oh, they look sort of alike. And they did. It was pretty remarkable. But once you added up all the facts, there was no possibility. So This is just one tool, I guess, is what I stress to people.
That's a very good point. Because, the photo industry, I mean, photos changed so quickly. I mean, we went from daguerreotypes through tintypes to paper. I mean, and it didn't take long. It didn't take long for that evolution. And so you have to look at the original to see whether or not that's, in fact, in the same time period.
Right.
Because you'll find a lot of them are not. And some of the really old ones are pretty hard to compare. I mean, if it isn't a good photograph,
right,
or if the head isn't big enough to be able to get a good image.
Right. So I really love visual face recognition, as a tool. It works quite well for everything. And it's visualfacerecognition.com, $29.95, and you get a lifetime license to use it on your computer. It works on Windows or Mac. Bob, this is an off-the-wall question, but where do you think all this facial recognition stuff is going to go?
Well, the thing that's coming is, and it is in place in some face recognition software, is what we call 3D, which will allow a photograph to be normalized much more than we do today. If you had someone looking to the right, it would correct and have them looking straight forward.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but the problem is when you do that, it's got to be done very carefully. You can lose something when you do that. You're basically inventing face that isn't there in the photograph. So it has to be done carefully. But that's the next big thing in face recognition. And everybody's trying to get there. Nobody has yet that I know of. But it will be the next thing. But again, it's going to be hard to make it an accurate comparison, because you are playing around with the face and moving it around too much and reconstructing it, if you will. So that becomes a difficult thing to do.
Yeah. So do you, I did at one of the conferences, there was a man who could take your 2D photograph and make it 3D. So he'd make a model of you.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. So do you work a lot with law enforcement? You were saying you're working on a case with a 14-year-old and a 50-something-year-old. I mean, do you get called in for this kind of expertise?
I do. Once in a while, yeah. The 14-year-old to the old woman is actually it's a public thing, but it's a very famous case. I guess I can tell you, nothing secret about it. That this woman claimed to be the daughter of the Romanovs who were killed in Russia in 1918.
Oh, yes.
And there were actually 3 women that claimed to be the daughter, but this one woman claimed it her whole life and died recently, and was and when we looked at the comparison between her and this girl, it was startling. I mean, it was actually startling how close it was. And there were a lot of other factors going on. It's a big deal. People have tried DNA, and now they think the DNA is being called into question, and so it's kind of fun. You get into these things and you see how
that's just the kind of challenge you like.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens, but that was one that really got me. I mean, I was surprised. I'm skeptical when we do that kind of thing, and when I saw the results of this, I was really sort of startled at how close it was. So that was that, and that gave a little momentum to the whole activity that's going on. But what's interesting, of course, is you do the face recognition on the other 2 women, and it's obvious that it's not the same as the young girl. So that's part of what I should say is if you also have something that doesn't match, that's pretty obvious to,
It is. It's pretty obvious to you. It's pretty obvious to me. The faces don't match pretty clearly. Sometimes when someone comes to me, and I know you as well, and they have this picture that they think is a famous person, and we look at it, and we have, I know I do, a visual memory. This is what I do. I work with pictures, you work with pictures, and you look at it and you know, like that, not a match. But other times, people want you to run the software. So anyway, my guest today has been Bob Schmitt of Visual Face Recognition, a software that compares 2 faces and is another tool in your photo detective toolbox. So Bob, thank you so much for joining me for another episode of The Photo Detective. And if that 3D stuff ever gets a little better, we'll have you back on and we'll talk some more. Maybe you'll have a really interesting case.
Okay, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for watching and listening. You can submit your questions for future episodes using the Ask Maureen button on MaureenTaylor.com or through any of my social media contacts. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram as The Photo Detective and on Facebook at Maureen Photo Detective. I hope you'll come back for the next show. Don't forget to send me your questions.